All right, so get this. We're going deep into ancient Rome today, togas, gladiators, and political drama that could rival anything you see on TV today. And since you wanted to know more about Cicero, the most famous orator in history, we're really going to dig into this guy, his life, work, his whole legacy.
Yeah, what a life it was. Not born into power, no famous family name to help him out. And yet he becomes one of the most important figures in Roman history. It's a story that says a lot about, the power of words, the complexities of ambition.
Yeah, and we've got this incredible interview you sent me with Dr. Henriette van der Blam from the University of Birmingham. She just brings Cicero to life. And right away, it's clear this guy was ambitious, super smart, but also had his flaws, like a real person, dealing with a world that's practically falling apart around him.
Absolutely. And that's what makes Cicero so interesting, right? He wasn't some untouchable figure. He called himself a new man, always trying to prove himself in a society that was obsessed with who your family was and military glory.
Yeah. It's like he's playing a real-life Game of Thrones, isn't it?
Yeah.
Using his wit and his words to climb the ladder, outsmarting his rivals, making deals, dealing with betrayals. I mean, we're going to see how he played this game, throughout his career, from his early days in the Forum to the top of the political world, and of course, eventually his tragic fall.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it all begins with his unusual rise to power. Cicero realized early on that words were his weapons, his way to succeed. He wasn't a soldier, so he really focused on his public speaking skills, studying with the best teachers in Rome.
And he didn't stop there, did he?
Nope.
Dr. van der Blam mentions that he even studied abroad, Athens first, then Rhodes. I mean, talk about dedication, right?
It's amazing, isn't it? Athens was known for logic and arguments, like Aristotle and all those philosophers. But Rhodes, on the other hand, Rhodes was all about the emotional stuff, using rhetoric to really move people, inspire them, persuade them.
So he wasn't just learning how to talk. He was mastering all these different styles, different ways to use rhetoric. He was building this massive toolbox of persuasion, preparing himself for anything he might face in the Roman Forum. Right?
Exactly. And we should be clear here. The Roman Forum wasn't some quiet courtroom. It was the center of Roman life, a huge open-air space, crowded, and the audience, well, let's just say they weren't shy. Imagine trying to make your case with people yelling, heckling, trying to throw you off. It was high pressure, high stakes. And this is where Cicero really shined.
Talk about a trial by fire, right?
Mm.
Dr. van der Blam even points out that his early cases, they really show his ambition. And he was willing to, push the limits, defending people in criminal court, which was risky, but it got him noticed.
Oh, yeah, and he wasn't afraid to take on cases that had, political implications, even if it meant making powerful enemies. But that's Cicero for you, always pushing the envelope, looking for the next big challenge.
It's almost like he was using these cases to build his reputation, showing off his skills, getting ready for bigger things. It wasn't just about justice, It was about playing the game, climbing the ladder.
You're getting at something really important here, and this is where understanding Roman society is key. Military success, that was usually how you got political power. But Cicero had to find a different path. He had to use his words, his intelligence to navigate this, this complex and often ruthless system.
And he did it during a period of crazy upheaval and violence.
Yeah.
Imagine coming of age during a decade of civil war. Rome in the late 80s BC, not exactly a peaceful place.
Oh, no, not at all. That was a time of political assassinations, power grabs, and widespread unrest. But you mentioned earlier that chaos can create opportunities, right?
Exactly. All the established figures, they were either dead or fighting for their lives. It left this vacuum that someone like Cicero could, step into.
And he did. He was ready, waiting, sharpening his skills, waiting for the right moment to make his move. And when that moment came, he took it.
This is where things get really interesting. Cicero, through talent and strategy, he manages to become a major player in this Roman Game of Thrones. And his biggest test, his most defining moment, well, that was still to come.
You're talking about the Catiline conspiracy, right? A story so dramatic, so full of twists and turns, it could be a movie.
Absolutely. But before we jump into that, I think it's worth taking a moment to really appreciate how far Cicero had come. From a new man to a rising star in Roman politics, all through the power of his words. It's a testament to his ambition, his intelligence, and his mastery of, the game.
Yeah, it really shows that even in a world ruled by military might, words can still have a huge impact. And Cicero, more than anyone, understood how to wield that power.
All right, so we've got Cicero, this master orator. He's climbing the ranks in a Roman Republic that's, pretty much on the verge of falling apart. And then, bam, 63 BC, he becomes consul, the top guy. Just as this crazy plot unfolds, one of the most infamous in Roman history, the Catalan conspiracy.
Yeah, it's huge, not just for Cicero himself, but for the entire Republic. It really puts his skills to the test,
Oh, yeah.
his ability to persuade, strategize, make quick decisions when everything is on the line.
You sent me a bunch of stuff on this conspiracy, and wow, it's wild. This Catalan character was like a disgruntled politician, right? Failed to get elected consul a bunch of times. Seems like he had a pretty big grudge.
You got it. Catalan, he came from this old aristocratic family, but his political career was going nowhere, deep in debt too. And he saw this chance, this opportunity to take advantage of all the unrest and economic inequality in Rome. Kind of like a populist firebrand, I guess, promising radical change, even if it meant destroying everything.
So he starts gathering followers, right? Disgruntled veterans, people struggling to make ends meet, even some wealthy Romans who saw a chance to profit from all the chaos. And they're not just complaining about politics, they're actually planning to overthrow the Republic, assassinate leaders, burn down Rome itself.
It was a real threat. And Cicero, now consul, he had access to all this intelligence, informants whispering in his ear about what was brewing. You can only imagine the pressure he was under. If he acted too soon, it could backfire, maybe make him look paranoid or power-hungry. But if he waited too long, the whole republic could go up in flames.
It's like a ticking time bomb, right? And he's trying to defuse it with everyone watching, judging his every move. Dr. Vanderblam talks about Cicero's first Catilinarian speech, the one delivered directly to Catiline in the Senate. Reading that speech, I was on the edge of my seat.
Oh, absolutely. Cicero goes all out, publicly accuses Catiline, lists his crimes, his co-conspirators, the whole scheme. And the Senate, which is usually all about decorum and debate, it erupts in chaos. You've got to picture this. Senators shouting, Catiline trying to defend himself. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
It's insane. And what's even more amazing is that this speech, it was a calculated risk. Cicero knew that by exposing Catiline like this, he was forcing him to act, to reveal himself as an enemy of Rome.
Right. Cicero needed Catiline to make a move, to show himself as a threat to the state. And it worked. Catiline, he flees Rome and joins his rebel army. That gave Cicero the justification he needed to take action.
So he goes back to the Senate, delivers what's known as his fourth Catilinarian. And this one is a masterpiece of persuasion. He lays out the danger, the evidence he's collected, even intercepted letters that prove the conspiracy. He taps into their fears, their patriotism, their duty to Rome.
And this is where you see the brilliance of Cicero's rhetoric. He doesn't just give them facts, he creates this narrative, a story that pits the forces of order and justice against the chaos and violence that Catiline represents. He paints a vivid picture of what happens if the conspiracy succeeds. Bloodshed, destruction, the end of the Republic as they know it.
And it works. The Senate votes to declare a tumultus, which gives Cicero emergency powers to crush the rebellion. But then things get even more complicated, right? Because now he's got these conspirators in custody, some of them high-ranking senators, and he has to decide what to do with them.
Yeah, this is where Cicero faces a real dilemma, and it's one that still resonates with us today. Does he follow the law, give these conspirators a trial, even though that risks more unrest and delay? Or does he take a more drastic approach, put aside legal process for the sake of expediency, what he sees as the greater good of Rome?
That's a tough one. And this is where the legal arguments get interesting. Dr. Vanderblam highlights the debate that raged in the Senate. You have some, like Silanus, arguing for execution. They cite precedent and the need for swift justice. Then you've got Julius Caesar, already a rising star, making this nuanced argument against the death penalty, warning against setting a dangerous precedent, says it could undermine the rule of law.
It's so interesting to see how this debate plays out, all the different viewpoints, the moral and legal complexities. It's not a simple, black and white situation. And ultimately, it's Cato the Younger, known for his, rigid principles and his strong sense of duty, who convinces the Senate to go with execution.
So Cicero, now backed by the Senate, he orders the execution of the conspirators. No formal trial. It was bold, it was risky, and it would have long-lasting consequences.
Absolutely. In the short term, it looks like a win. The conspiracy is over, Catiline is defeated and killed in battle, and Cicero is hailed as the savior of Rome, father of his country. But this act, this decision to bypass the law, it would come back to haunt him.
Classic example of how even victory can have a downside, how the means don't always justify the ends. especially in a world as messed up and unforgiving as ancient Rome.
Right, and it reminds us that the Game of Thrones, as you put it, well, you don't always play it with clean hands. Even the most skilled players, the best speakers, sometimes have to make tough choices. Choices that have unintended consequences.
So now we've got Cicero at the height of his power. He's just saved the Republic from this deadly plot.
Yeah.
But the seeds of his downfall are already planted.
It's a turning point, a moment of triumph, but also a moment that shows just how unstable the Roman political system was, how precarious power itself really is.
Okay, so last we left off, Cicero was on top of the world, hailed as Rome's savior for crushing the Catiline conspiracy. But, in ancient Rome, peace never lasted long, especially for a guy like Cicero, who always seemed to be right in the middle of the chaos.
And remember that risky decision he made, executing those conspirators without a trial. It came back to haunt him. It created this huge legal and ethical debate that, his enemies were quick to pounce on.
Oh yeah, the fallout was massive. Dr. Vanderblam points out that even some of Cicero's supporters in the Senate, they were a little uneasy about it. They saw it as a dangerous precedent, like it could undermine the laws and traditions that held the Republic together.
Right, and there were plenty of people in Rome who, well, they just didn't like Cicero. They resented his success, his sharp wit, the way he made enemies. So when this controversy blew up, they saw a chance to take him down.
And that's where Clodius comes in, right? This ambitious and, let's face it, kind of shady politician who saw Cicero as a rival, an obstacle in his own climb to power. He used that whole execution without a trial thing to rile up the public, turn them against Cicero. Made him look like a tyrant, someone above the law.
And it worked. The pressure built. And in 58 BC, Cicero was forced into exile. Can you imagine the humiliation? This guy who'd saved the Republic, now being driven out by the very people he'd sworn to protect?
It's brutal. But Dr. Vanderblam explains that this exile, it actually became a turning point for Cicero. He didn't just, sit around feeling sorry for himself. He used the time to think, to write, to really develop his political and philosophical ideas.
Exactly. This is where we see Cicero shifting, moving from the spoken word, those passionate speeches in the forum, to writing, crafting these treatises and essays that would have this lasting impact on Western thought. He digs into questions about government, justice, morality, the nature of the Republic itself.
It's like he's trying to figure out what went wrong. How could this system he believed in, this republic he fought for, turn on him like that? And in doing so, he creates some of his most important works on the republic, on the laws, exploring these basic principles of law, liberty, civic duty.
And those writings, they're still relevant today, especially when we think about our own political systems, the challenges of democracy, the balance of power, the rights and responsibilities of citizens. Cicero wrestles with these timeless questions in such a profound and thought-provoking way.
But for Cicero, this wasn't just theoretical. He eventually returns to Rome, welcomed back as a hero by his supporters. But he steps right back into this political landscape that's become even more volatile. The Republic is falling apart under the weight of ambition and rivalry. You've got powerful figures like Julius Caesar and Pompey fighting for control.
And remember, Cicero had worked with both men. He admired their skills, but also recognized the danger they posed to the Republic. He believed in shared power, checks and balances, not one man ruling everything. So he stuck in the middle, trying to navigate this dangerous game, balancing his principles with the need to, just survive politically.
Like walking a tightrope during an earthquake. And you see this struggle in his letters, his speeches, his actions. He sides with Pompey in the civil war against Caesar, not because he thought Pompey was the perfect leader, but because he saw Caesar's growing power as the bigger threat to the Republic.
It was a gamble, and it didn't pay off. Caesar wins, and while he pardons Cicero, the Republic was essentially finished. It's the end of an era. And I imagine, for Cicero, there was a sense of loss. Like he was mourning the ideals he'd fought so hard to uphold.
So what does he do? He pulls back from public life, focuses on his writing, explores philosophy, trying to find some meaning and purpose in a world that's been completely upended.
And then Caesar's assassinated.
Talk about a twist. And Cicero is suddenly thrown back into the spotlight. He sees a chance, a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, the Republic can be revived.
And he goes all in, doesn't he? He becomes this fierce opponent of Mark Antony who's trying to grab power after Caesar's death. He gives these blistering speeches, they're called the Philippics. He condemns Antony's ambition, urges the Senate to defend the Republic.
He's like a one-man resistance fighting tyranny with his words.
But it was a losing battle. Antony, together with Octavian, Caesar's heir, they formed the Second Triumvirate. And they didn't tolerate dissent. Cicero was on their list, and in 43 BC, he was caught and executed.
It's a tragic ending for a man who dedicated his life to words, to persuasion, to the idea of a free republic. It shows that even the most eloquent voices can be silenced by force, that the struggle for liberty and justice, it never really ends.
It's sobering, but also inspiring, because Cicero's story shows us that even when things seem impossible, when everything's at stake, speaking truth to power, standing up for what we believe in, it matters.
Wow, that's really powerful. This deep dive into Cicero's life has been incredible, full of political intrigue, courtroom drama, powerful speeches, and ultimately, this tragic ending. But it's given me a lot to think about, especially how relevant his ideas still are today.
Me too. I hope it's inspired you to learn more about this amazing figure, to read his works, and to, explore the world he lived in. Because as we've seen, the lessons of ancient Rome, they often speak to the challenges we face today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and times of Cicero. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.